Okay, guys, my name's Tom Alibrando, IWI US. We're going to discuss the TS12 Tavor shotgun, how to take it down. But before we do that, first thing we have to do is verify that the weapon is clear. That's part of the procedure. It's in the manual. We want to make sure you're safe with the weapon. Make sure there's no ammunition in the area. The only tools you're going to need to actually break it down as far as we're going to do it is a flathead screwdriver and about a 3mm punch, and you'll be good to go. All right, so to clear the weapon, first thing you're going to do, without weapon on safe, finger straight, you're going to clear the chamber out and make sure that the chamber is clear. Okay. The next thing you're going to do is turn each tube and make sure that you don't see any shells in any of the tubes. If there is, you'll unload that tube. So you know there's nothing in the chamber. You clear the tube out. The last thing you'll do is you'll hit the shell release, shell latch on the bottom, push it forward, charge it open, and then you'll verify one more time. No rounds in the weapon whatsoever. So that's how we're going to clear the weapon before we actually clean it. Now, before we tear it down, you want to hit the bolt release and make sure that the bolt's forward because we're going to take the bolt out the back here in a second. Okay, so we've cleared the weapon out. We're going to take the weapon apart, and what we're going to work on right now is the bolt assembly and removing the bolt assembly. On the back of the weapon, there's a button right at the top of the butt. You're going to push that button in, and then you hit the heel of the butt plate, and it pops out the top of the weapon, right? So there's the actual butt plate right there. It's easier to do it when it's muzzled down because you're pushing against the recoil spring mech. Right now it's trying to push everything out. The next part you're going to see is this actual, it looks like a puzzle piece that's in there. It's actually holding the recoil spring mechanism in. You're going to push it all the way down, and you're going to push the actual sling swivel out. The sling swivel looks like a hex. Now, when I release this, you're going to see it kind of pops up. That's the recoil spring pushing against the back retaining plate. This comes off, and then the receiver simply slides off the back. Okay. Now we're going to bring it down here. To remove the bolt, all you're going to do is you're going to pull the bolt, and the recoil spring assembly will slide out the back. Now, the recoil spring assembly has a little button on the back of it. This is always going to go towards the rear. So when you reassemble, remember that protruding part is going to stick back, and the area where the spring kind of comes to a dead stop, that's going to go into the bolt. We'll put that down. Now, if you want to take the bolt out of the actual bolt carrier, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on this. Okay, we'll show you what you do. You've got two pins that run across it. Okay, one here at the rear, one here at the front. And what you're going to do is push those pins simply across. Okay, right or left, left or right, it doesn't really matter. Okay, the pins come out, and then the bolt comes out the front. Now you do have a firing pin. You'll see that protruding back here, and a firing pin retaining pin. For normal cleaning, you don't need to remove that at all. Just wipe it off, make sure it's cleared, and you're good to go. Before you reassemble this, there's a small spring in the bottom, and this spring actually retains the pins that hold the bolt inside the bolt carrier. You want to make sure that those are pressed all the way in. Make sure that that's good and tight before you reassemble it. Okay, so you have a little arch. The arch is going to go down into the bolt carrier, and you notice that those holes will align themselves. Okay, if you have it in properly, those holes are going to align themselves. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take the pin, pop it in, and you're probably going to have to give it a little bit of a whack with the back of a punch or maybe even a small mallet. And you do the same thing with the other pin. Put it in and give it a smack. Now, it's important that you do two things. You make sure it's flush and that it's moving freely. So this is moving back and forth. You know you have it assembled correctly when the extractor, which kind of looks like a horn on a bull or whatever, is at the top. There's a flat spot on the bottom. You know it's assembled correctly. All right, now we're going to zoom back out, and we'll show you how to put this back all together. I'm going to make sure that the bolt's all the way in the forward position. It just drops right on. It's going to slide on nice and easily onto the bar. You're going to take the recoil spring mech, put that on the back. Okay, this has to be inserted into the back of the bolt carrier. Again, you want to really make sure that long tab is facing rearward. You're going to grab the receiver, and it's going to slide right on. At the back of the receiver, there's a small hole there. that should protrude, that little detent should protrude at the rear, okay? Now this is where I'm going to take the weapon, I'm going to put it back on its muzzle again because that's going to make it easier to put back together. I slide the back plate on and it goes on like a puzzle piece, okay? Now once I have that down, you notice that the recoil spring wants to push everything back out. So I keep downward tension on it. I'm going to slide the actual sling swivel back through and it's going to be centered on itself, okay? After that's centered in the middle, I take the butt plate, I have to push down on the butt plate and then pop it all the way on. Okay, I got to give it a shot. And there it is. It's slid back together again. Now, the whole bolt assembly has been reassembled. Okay, it's good to go. Okay, so on the next segment, we're going to talk about pulling off the fore end of the actual piston. We're going to talk about the actual fore end. Now, if you're going to change the chokes on it, you have to remove the cap anyway. And this simply just unscrews. If you're familiar with shotguns, you know that there's a detent in there that ratchets onto it. Try not to over tighten it too much. After you unscrew this, it exposes the actual choke underneath. And now you can change the choke if you want to. You're going to have to remove the end cap, right, the retaining cap, to actually get to the choke and change it. The next thing that's going to happen is you just slide the fore end right off the rail and you're good to go. Now let's get a close-up of the actual piston system. So every so often you do want to clean the piston out on it. There's something we call a skidder tube, right? It goes back and forth. When the piston strikes the skidder tube, that's what actually hits the bolt. It's almost like a short stroke gas piston system. And to take this apart, this is where that flathead screwdriver comes into play, okay? You have a small spring, and you can get a close-up of this, that goes around, and what it's doing is it's holding the end cap on. Okay, remove this piece, pull it out, come on up to the actual regulator. You're going to unscrew it with your fingers. If you can't do it with your fingers, there's small holes in there that are for that 3mm punch. That'll help you break it free and get it out because it will carbon up. Okay, on the bottom of this is a flat spot, and that flat spot is going to be very important to us. If you can see that, flat spot's going to be very important to us when we're putting it back together because the flat spot has to be down. Okay, just kind of pop this forward, and it'll knock that piston out, and there's your piston right there. Now to reassemble it, go in from the front, put the piston in, and you want to make sure that the piston moves freely, which it does. You don't want to oil the piston. You want to make sure it's dry when it goes in. Light coat of oil on the outside of the actual regulator. Put the regulator in, kind of screw it in place, and that flat spot that we were identifying earlier has to face down. You can actually just about get a punch under there, okay? And that lets you know that, yep, it's aligned properly. And you're going to take the retaining spring and then pop it in, and now the piston assembly has been reassembled. All right, so one other assembly you can take apart. You don't have to do this for every cleaning, maybe once, twice a year. If it gets wet or soaked from being in the field, you might take this out. This is the receiver. We took the receiver off, and obviously, here's the actual carrier located under here in the bolt release. So if you're going to pull these pins out, to pull the trigger group out, make sure you go left to right. There's one spring on the right side, so as opposed to having the pins go over that spring twice, it kind of comes out once. So there's a spring over on the left side. You push on it, okay, and it'll pop the pin out. And then you push on the other side and you pop the pin out. And then the trigger group will fall out the bottom, okay? Now, this is where you get in there and you clean it, wipe it off, light oil on the springs and the components there. And then it allows you to get inside and clean inside the upper receiver. Now, before you can put this back in, you'll notice that there's a lever located on the inside, and essentially that's the bolt release. Okay, it also operates one of the actual shell stop for the gun. So you're going to have to move that out of the way as you put the trigger group back in. So you grab the trigger group, kind of push it off to the side, and you can actually push the bolt release button and hold it down. That'll pin it in place, and then you can align the holes. And my suggestion is you went out to the right side, you're going to insert the pins from the right side. Do the front one first, and then do the rear one next, and make sure they're flush and that they click into place. and now that's reassembled, and you're good to go. Hey guys, you're going to notice that there's a gas regulator. It's L and H. L is for light loads, and H for heavy loads, right? High brass, maybe 3-inch magnum. How do you adjust the gas regulator? It's very simple. You can grab the charging handle and aggressively pull it out the side. It's held in by 2 different pins inside their retaining springs. You're going to put it in the slot, and you're going to use this as a lever. So if I want to go to heavy loads and turn down the gas a little bit, I just turn it down till it clicks. I'm going to come back, and the best thing you can do is hook the front of where the slot that it goes in. So you're going to kind of grab it, angle it in, and then pop this all the way through, and it'll actually find its way on the other side of the slot. Okay. Now, if I want to go back to light loads, same thing. I just pop this out, put this back in like a handle, go from H to L, just rotate it up till you hear it click. You know it's good to go. You've adjusted the gas system. And then, again, kind of go in from the front, walk it down, and then pop it back in place until it's secure. And your charging handle is actually acting as your gas regulator lever as well. All right, we have the weapon assembled. Everything seems to be working right. We're going to do a function test on the gun to make sure it's squared away. Obviously, you've already verified the weapon is clear. There's no rounds in the tubes. We're good to go, right? So function test on this is going to be a little different from maybe a regular shotgun. It's a semi-auto shotgun the way it works. First thing you're going to do is with the safety on, you attempt to press the trigger, point it in a safe direction, obviously. It shouldn't go bang. You're going to put the weapon on fire. You're going to press the trigger until you hear the hammer fall. Right now, things are going just fine. You want to hold the trigger back. You actually want to hold the trigger back. You're going to cycle the bolt, and it's going to lock to the rear because it's got no rounds. That's what it's doing, what it's supposed to do. So that's part of the function test. But you're going to hold the trigger back, drop the bolt while you're holding the trigger back, and then slowly release the trigger. You should hear a reset. That's your function test for the shotgun to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. Okay. So, guys, glad you were able to join us. This is the TS12, and if you have any questions, just visit us online at IWI US. And we'll answer your questions best we can.